Hey, welcome back to Constructive Interference. I am your host, Joel Curtinitis. And hey, you know what? I was thinking about it. You probably have no idea what a Curtinitis is. And that's my fault because you know what? Last episode, when Josh and I were spending time with you guys, we did not really bother to introduce ourselves that much. Um, I am Joel Curtinitis. I am a columnist, write for the Des Moines Register as well as other online sites. But you know what? Beyond that, I don't have a lot of credentials. I'm a homeschooler and a Christian and a conservative and libertarian and just all around a normal dude. And when people ask me, when I write articles and things like this, like, yeah, well, what do you spend most of your time doing? The fact of the matter is, it's kind of just normal stuff. I'm working on my house and I'm raising kids and doing all these non-glamorous things that people don't usually associate with columnists and political people. But that's that's what life is. And so a lot of times I feel like people these days have gotten a little bit tired of the expert opinions anyway, right? Because people who are supposed to be experts on things are saying things that don't really make sense a lot of times. So if you're joining us here on Constructive Interference, you're not here for the letters behind our names, clearly, but hopefully you'll have a fresh perspective on it anyway. Josh, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself too to our audience?
Well, I have no letters behind my name at all.
What? That is not what you told me when I asked you about this. Good grief, man.
I mean, that was like an interview. I mean, everybody kind of fudges their resume for that sort of thing, but no. But no. Hey, yeah, I am a web designer who wants to make movies when he grows up, and
if he grows up,
if I grow, I hope to someday. I'm only 35 years old, so I still have some time to grow up and have a real adult job someday. But
fair enough.
Yes, yeah, but seriously though, like Joel said, my life is extremely non-glamorous. We homeschool our kids. I work from home. We go to church on Sundays. And I'm not considered an expert on anything. As a matter of fact, I was once called a potato farmer in an online debate because of my presumed ignorance. So that's me, Josh the potato farmer.
Wow. You know what? That might just be your official new call sign. Although I do feel like that might be a little bit racially insensitive toward Irish people. I don't know. I mean,
we can't be too careful.
I'm just saying. Yeah, we don't start down that road now. It's too early. I mean, we got to get to episode 10 or something at least before we start going into roads like that. Good night. So this last week, we went to a football game. And I would say I'm talking about my family, went to a football game, went down to Kansas City and went to see the first NFL game that I have ever been to in my life. Okay, I've been to other games, college games and whatnot, but I went to the first NFL game. I was so excited about it. Now, I'm not the world's biggest sports fan. I only got into it a little bit later in life. My dad is a big sports guy, but I didn't go that route. I was the studious one. I read a lot. I did music. It wasn't really big into sports. When I reached a certain age, got into adulthood, I think out of sheer boredom, I decided to look into the sports thing a little bit more, and then I got into it a little bit more. I am naturally competitive, so that part excites me. And eventually I found my way into football. And now, I'm there. I play fantasy football. I'm along with most of America. I follow things pretty closely, even despite the kneeling controversy, whatnot. So my wife and I decided to go down to Kansas City. I'm from Florida originally, so my team, a couple years ago, I was like the last Jacksonville Jaguars fan. Now we've got some bandwagoners because we're good again for whatever reason. But it didn't look like it this last weekend. I mean, Jacksonville went to Kansas City. Here I was in my teal outfit in an ocean of red Chiefs fans, and it was a crazy experience because I'm not your stereotypical sports guy. I couldn't just turn my brain off and enjoy the game. Probably just because I didn't have enough drinks to do that like everyone else did. But there was a lot going on, and I'm not just talking about the game. Like the game was ugly; it was atrocious. My team got destroyed, and it was ugly. But the dynamics of the place were really making me think about things that I should not have been thinking about during a football game. You go there to relax and unwind and spend time and cheer and have all your fun. But that's not what happened. I ended up sitting there pondering like what is happening in this place. And part of the reason was because of this. I was in the minority. I'm in enemy territory as far as NFL fan bases go. I'm sitting there in my Jaguars jersey, and there's a couple of drunk bros behind us just raining down insults on my team, you know? And I'm sitting there with this internal debate going on where one side of me is saying, you know what? This is ridiculous. It doesn't even matter. I don't know these people. I don't know the players. Like, I am not invested in this at all. I'm just some dude who spent too much money to come here and watch a game that I could have watched for free at home. And but then there's the other side of me that was like this actually getting riled up at these guys, and I like wanted to turn around and yell at them like, lay off, what is wrong with you? That's my team. And there was like, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is the most illogical thing ever, but I can't deny it. Like, I am actually getting angry right now for no reason at all. And you could see, what my wife noted when we were in there as well, is you could see the same thing on the rulings of the referees. And this is NFL commonplace, right? If the ref rules for your team, then they made a good call. If they rule against your team, they made a bad call.
Well, they're obviously being paid. I mean, there's obviously bribery if they ruled against your team.
Right. Like, but that's and you can hear it in the response of the crowd every time. It just doesn't matter. If they're ruling for your team, it was a good call. It's pretty rare when you see something so obvious that even the home team, when they're ruled against, will go, that was a good call. Then there's not a lot of fair-mindedness in NFL parks. But the point of this is to say, I got a firsthand view of what tribalism really looks like when it's outside of, the things that we usually talk about. People talk about political tribalism, and there is a deep sense of political tribalism in the US right now, but it's sort of, for the most part, it's kind of clean, right? I mean, it's Washington D.C. It's people saying dumb things in microphones with suits on in the Capitol. But it's a little bit scary to think, how quickly that could devolve into the kind where it's a bunch of drunk people with sharp objects like lunging at each other, And I think as passionate as America is about sports, it's easy to see that mentality kind of crossing boundaries and escaping. And to give you an idea of just how much we're into sports, Americans actually spent $100 billion
with a B?
On sports last year.
100
With a
billion?
B. $100 billion on sports last year. And over half of that was actually sporting events. And that's the part that threw me aside, because like there was, I mean, there's all sorts of like sports related things, right? Your parents, you kids have soccer and you got to buy equipment and whatnot. That's what I would have figured most sports expenditures went to. No. It's actual events, tickets, parking, like actually going to sporting events was $56 billion last year. Now, compare that to the other kind of major entertainment things the U.S. has. It's not even close. So video games, which have taken a gigantic turn up, I believe that's kind of the future of entertainment. That's only $36 billion. That was 30. That's a third of what we spent on sports. And then if you look at movies, last year was the biggest box office year ever, and it totaled 11 billion, 11.3. So you're talking about a gigantic industry that's based on tribalism fundamentally.
So you're telling me that 5 times more money was spent going to sporting events than was spent on movies?
Yes.
Wow.
Total.
I would never have guessed that.
It was a little bit surprising. It was a little bit surprising to see that when I pulled it up. But again, we have this strong urge to just get into camps. And I'm the same way. Like my team, like, okay, yes, I grew up in Florida originally. That doesn't have anything to do with why I should like a team of sports ballers, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like these guys, and and the crazy part is, especially in professional, like at least with a college, you can have some loyalty to your college, right? Okay, I went to this school, this guy went to my school, I feel some connection there. But these guys, these are the pros. They get traded every year. There might not be a single man on that roster that's there this year that'll be there next year. I don't know. And yet you have this sort of attachment where you get defensive of them, and it was just crazy. And so I think one of the things that we wanted to go into this week is like how how does that tribalism, what happens when that spills out? There's places where it's kind of innocent, it's kind of benign, and it doesn't really hurt anything. But what happens when that gets out? And you had an example of a story up in Portland, I believe, that kind of shows where this goes.
Yeah, Portland, Oregon. Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious, why people like to form themselves into tribes, because tribes kind of make the world, make sense. It's like, if this is my group, and my group wears this certain color, and that's that group, and they wear their color, then I can enter a situation and immediately make sense of it and figure out where I belong and what I should be doing. It really vastly simplifies our social interactions if we can identify with a tribe. And, that can be okay, depending on our perspective. How to say this? It's one of those things where it's a model, it's a simplified model of reality. And that model works okay as long as you remember that it's just a model. But when you start to think that that model is real, we start to think that your tribe is a real thing and not just this simplified model you have, then you get into trouble. This incident in Portland, there was a Antifa group that was blocking off the roads.
And what's Antifa?
Antifa? What is Antifa?
What's an Antifa?
What is an Antifa? Antifa stands for anti-fascist. So Antifa, it's sort of a loose-knit group with no central leadership. So I guess you call it a grassroots group. By those criteria.
Well, it sounds like a good group to be a part of. They're anti-fascist. Yeah. I mean, I don't like fascists. Do you?
No, I don't like fascists at all. Kind of like Stalin's... the Red Army soldiers didn't like fascists either, They were all Stalin was totally anti-fascist.
OG,
yes. But, so Antifa, they claim to be anti-fascist, they claim to be anti-racist, they claim to be against whatever bad things are associated with this supposedly resurgent racism in America. But their tactics... their tactics kind of resemble what fascists would do, ironically. They like to put on masks, and they like to vandalize, and they like to assault people. And in this case in Portland, they were blocking traffic. They were blocking traffic because we don't need to discuss in detail why this was. They believe, apparently, that a man had been killed by the police unjustly. But whatever the reason, they were blocking off traffic in downtown Portland. And the incident I want to talk about is there was a man who was from, was it South Carolina or North Carolina?
I thought it was North Carolina. Yeah, it's
North Carolina. This man is driving his car through Portland, Oregon, and he has North Carolina.
His first mistake.
Yeah, first mistake. What are you doing there? Well, apparently the Antifa people wondered the same thing. What are you doing here? Because this mob saw his North Carolina license plates, and based just upon seeing his license plate, saying he was from North Carolina, started attacking his car, started calling him a white supremacist, and saying that because he was a white supremacist, he should be out of their town. And then they proceeded to attack his car and kick his car. I guess he got away uninjured, but his car suffered some damage if you watch the video of this incident.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack and talk about there as far as the whole Antifa situation. But what really amazed me about this is that these people blocking the road, they decided that this guy was a quote-unquote white supremacist and that they needed to attack him and drive him out of their town strictly on the basis of his license plate. That's all they knew about the guy, is that his car was registered in North Carolina. And because of that, they saw that he was an enemy and they had to get him out of there.
Wow. Well, you know what? That's a sense of tribalism that I can at least identify with, if I see somebody here with a New Jersey license plate, I should probably chase them down too, right? Like that makes sense to me. Like,
yeah.
certain counties in the Chicago area, if I see that on the plate, I just know you're not going to do any good here. No,
yeah, well, I live in Texas. If I see anybody in the road without a Texas plate, I just run them off, of course, because that's what obviously they shouldn't be here.
Low blow, Josh. Unreal.
Oh my goodness, Joel, I forgot. How do I walk this back now?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know what?
I'm sure
the Texas audience will be tuning in tonight.
Yes.
But, right on.
But yeah, so just interesting. You mentioned Team Jersey as being the blue guy in the sea of red. Well, it's like so to these Antifa people in Portland. Apparently, if you have the wrong license plate, it's like having the wrong team color on. It's like this ants. you've seen we have fire ants here in Texas. You poke their nest and they all come and swarm out.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I did grow up in Florida, you know.
Yeah, all right. So how do ants know what to attack? How do they know what's an enemy and what's a friend? How come they don't attack each other? Well, they just go by smell. Ants put off a smell, and each ant in the colony has exactly the same odor, and that's how they recognize each other. Oh, you smell like me, so I won't attack you. Oh, you don't smell like me, so I'm going to sting you. And that's just how they operate. And it's crazy to see human beings operating with sort of the same mentality or lack of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Hey, this guy over here, he's not like me in some way. He's doesn't have my colors on, so I'm going to attack him. And having that alone be the basis of your actions.
Right. And I think that the breadth of that attack is what's striking, because, you know, when you talk about the difference between people and fire ants, you would hope that rationalization would be in there, right? You would hope that we could analyze, issues and topics on an individual basis and say, well, hey, here's what I think about this issue. Here's what I think about this one. But that doesn't turn out to be the case. What a lot of folks do, and I think this is, a problem that's been noted increasingly commonly across America right now, is that people just sort of look for someone else who they generally agree with, and then wait for them to say something on a particular issue, and then just take that side. It's easier. And one of the most glaring examples of this recently was the Kavanaugh controversy that we discussed last week. Well, in the wake of the trial there, or the hearing, rather, the Senate Judiciary hearing,
The job interview that looks strangely like a trial. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. There was an NPR PBS Marist poll that came out for October 1st. Actually, was when the poll was conducted, I guess, or released, and the numbers that were on that were striking. So just as an example, here's one question from the poll. College professor Dr. Christine Blasey Ford has accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her at a party when they were both in high school. Both Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee last week. Who do you think is telling the truth about what happened at the party in high school? Now, there's a ton of demographic data here that you could have so much fun with. They broke it down in terms of age and sex and all these other things. But this one was the one that was just such a facepalm, okay? Democrats, they broke it down by party affiliation. Democrats believe Christine Blasey Ford at 76%, Brett Kavanaugh at 5%. Republicans believe Brett Kavanaugh at 76%, Christine Blasey Ford at 8%. It's the exact same percentage believed either one based on party affiliation. And you can see this across the poll. The phenomenon is basically the same. Independents were sort of a little bit more split on it, but your party affiliation determined whether you were predisposed to believe Brett Kavanaugh or Christine Blasey Ford.
Yeah, and with a high degree of accuracy.
Yeah, with a high degree of accuracy, right? I don't even know what to do with that. Like, in my mind, I'm looking at it going, I can't make sense of a culture where somebody's guilt or innocence can be presupposed based on their party alignment. I can't make sense of that. Can you?
Well, you can make sense of it again, and I guess in terms of the team affiliation. You know, which jersey is the person testifying wearing? And I guess to a lot of people, Ford had the Democrat jersey on, and Kavanaugh had the Republican jersey on. Which is not to say that everybody on either side is not considering the testimony and evidence rationally, but obviously to have a split like that, at least many people are not.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's just unreal, though, that we could get to that point, and I think that there's a lot to be said, because this isn't, when we're talking about tribalism, it's not the same exactly as collectivism, right? Now, it's a branch of collectivism, but it's not in the same general left-right sense of, communist versus capitalist, that sort of thing. Because you have right-wing tribalism. I mean, no doubt. If there's one thing that has been spurred on by Donald Trump in the last 2 years, it is right-wing tribalism. I mean, no doubt. You've got reactionary, and this is where the left, I think, has some valid critiques, where they say, he has awakened this, white rights and white pride groups and things like that. And I don't lay that at Trump's feet. necessarily, but I do, clearly you can see that these people who, this is not something we debated really in the 90s. This is not something we debated 10 years ago, but now all of a sudden there are people popping up, reactionaries, who are saying, all right, well, if everybody else is going to have a tribe,
Right.
then, by golly, so will I. And my tribe's bigger than yours, by the way, so get out of our way.
Right.
And so it's just, it's a terrible thing to start, because I don't know where it ends. I don't think anybody knows where it ends.
Well, keep in mind, I mean, the word tribalism, there are, throughout much of human history, people, and still today in some places, people did exist in literal tribes,
Hmm.
where your loyalty is simply a matter of where you were born. I was born to this family, and I recognize this patriarch who's in that, in that house over there. And simply because of my birth, I'm loyal to this tribe, and that means I'm going to go kill the other tribe if they cross us, just because they're not us.
There was another element though. As you're talking about this, there was so there's a group that I believe USA Today puts together that's supposed to be, across the nation, across the aisle is, I believe, the group name for it. It's on Facebook, and the idea of it is to get people from different mindsets talking. Well, they put out I don't know if it was them officially doing it or someone posting on the wall, but it was an interesting set of graphs, pie charts on there about general American demographics versus the demographics of Congress and our representatives. And so you had, nationwide, 33% is white males, but in Congress it's 78% or whatever, that's white males. And so things like that we're trying to address things like class and saying, well, this is a problem. How do we fix that? And I thought that was really strange. As we're talking about tribalism here, there's different ways to do it, right? Because people could look at Americans and say, well, sure, you're part of an American tribe. Okay. And, if you want to get into the whole nationalism thing, you could do that too. I think there's a case to be made there. But I think the reaction a lot of people would have is, no, well, what we love about America is the ideology, right? That's why people immigrate here. That's why people come here. That's what the founding was about. I mean, it's an ideology that is uniquely American, and a sense of freedom and a sense of independence that's uniquely American. That's what's valuable. It's not just the color of our flag or the particular patch of dirt that we hold. But that's what was so, I think, dismaying in my mind about seeing this list of graphs. And I'll try to post that in the show notes for folks so you can go reference what I'm talking about. But is it necessarily a problem? I mean, is it necessarily a problem that one demographic group has overrepresentation in a given area? People talk about this, in different job families, right? Like, nobody cares that men make up the majority of trash collectors, or that there's a disproportionate number of black folks in the NFL. Nobody cares about those overrepresentations, but in Congress, it's being represented as, and this is unquestioned. It's unquestioned. Like, this is a problem. How do we fix it?
Well, I mean, like you touched on there, you can kind of define a group by any metrics. Well, for instance, that's like, well, take racism in America, for instance. We Americans tend to classify all people from Asia as just being Asian. That's like our catch-all. You have people who are black or white or Latino or Asian. But if you are in Asia, that's not all the case. You go to, if you are in Asia, people who are Korean or Japanese or Chinese or Vietnamese, they've recognize that distinction, quite heavily, and will think you're really stupid if you conflate Chinese and Japanese people. So it's very much a matter of perspective, and how do you draw these lines? How do you divide these people and decide which characteristics should delimit which group?
Well, right, and so that was my reaction to the whole thing. It was kind of twofold. So one, the question of whether this is actually a problem assumes, if you're going to look at the current makeup of Congress, and look, I'm not a fan of the federal government in general right now. I'm certainly not a fan of the things that Congress generally has done and not done.
You don't like the federal government, Joel?
Well, I know it's kind of crazy, right?
What?
I'm tempted to make some conspiracy jokes right now, but stop me. Just stop me.
Just don't do it. I'll stop you.
No. Oh gosh, no. But like, to say that's a problem, you first have to assume that these people are all wrong for the job, right? Because this is not like, it's not like there was a slate put together of Congress people all over America and they just had it bestowed upon them. Somebody walked over and hung a medal around their neck. Boof, you're a congressman. These people ran. They advertised. They worked. They worked on retail politics. They did mailers. They made their way into office and won the confidence and the votes of the people that elected them. Now, for better or for worse, I'm not saying that's not a glowing endorsement in a lot of cases, okay? But I'm just saying, to say that that demographic breakdown is necessarily wrong is to say that all the people that voted to put them there are stupid and don't know what they're doing and should have picked someone else. And so that's the first problem I have with it. But the second one I think is a little bit deeper, and that's the one that I think you touched on, and I think is the main problem with this, and that is this: it assumes that the most important distinctions between people are only skin deep, and I think that's
literally skin
simple
deep.
to right. I think that's simple to the point of dismissive. I grew up in the South. Black evangelicals are very passionate, very serious about their faith. Do you think for a moment that a black evangelical would rather see a black atheist in office over a white Christian or a Hispanic Catholic? Do you think maybe they're more interested, and maybe someone who can relate to them better is someone who can relate to them on the grounds of faith? And that's just one example. I mean, you could go any direction with that. When people, what defines people, if we reduce them to their skin color, how are we different? How are we different than people in the civil rights era that did that?
Or not. And I mean, like you said, there's so much more to a person than just their skin. Like I said, when I evaluate someone I'm going to vote for, I could care less what their skin color is or where they're from. I care about their ideas. I care about their heart. I care about their faith. That famous quote from Martin Luther King: "He dreamed of a day when his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." What is that content? And
don't you sometimes wonder if he would be lynched by the modern left if he were alive today?
Well, I'm sure they would have some very nasty things to say about him on CNN anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I maybe not physically, but I don't think he would be welcome.
Twitter lynch?
There's no way with his there's no way with his ideals that he put out there. There's no way that he would be welcome today in the on the political left. I don't see it anyway.
No, I don't think so. But yeah.
So on the value of individuals, you were talking to me about a movie, and I was not familiar with this, but I bet some folks in our audience probably are. So what was this movie that you were telling me about? Had something to say about that?
Oh, The Grave of the Fireflies, which is an anime from 1988. I mean, I'd heard about it before. It's real famous, and I saw it on Hulu and thought, okay, I'm finally going to watch this.
Are you sure if that's not about like the fact that Firefly was never renewed? Because that would be a really sad movie.
I'm pretty sure it's not about that. It's because of the timing.
Oh,
I mean, okay. it was years before Firefly. I'm sure people are sad about that, but no, it's not.
Oh, okay.
It's
right. just making sure. Like I said, I'm not familiar with it, so just had to check.
No, it's not about that. But
maybe I'll write that tragedy yet.
You do that. But yeah, so Grave of the Firefly. It's a movie by Studio Ghibli. Hayao Miyazaki's studio. All of his movies are made also by the same studio, even though this one was made by, who was the director of this movie? Isao Takahata. Pardon to our Japanese audience if I said that wrong. But this movie is very interesting. It's about these two Japanese children in World War II, and basically about their struggle for survival. It's a tragic, terribly sad movie, and it's good because it's so sad. But these two kids, it's in World War II in Japan, and because of the devastation that is wrought upon the Japanese cities and countryside by the American bombing, and because of all the resources being diverted to the war effort, and because of their parents being killed in the war, for all these things, these two Japanese kids basically end up starving. And it's about their struggle to survive. It kind of reminded me of another Studio Ghibli movie, which is called The Wind Rises. And that movie is about Jori Horikoshi, again, apologies to our Japanese audience, who is an aircraft designer who designed Japanese airplanes during World War II. And what really struck me about both of these movies is that although they're both set in World War II, and they're both about Japanese characters made by Japanese filmmakers, they really don't do anything to take a side. It's not like they don't try and portray the Japanese side of the war as being heroic or as being correct. They don't try and portray the Americans as being monsters or vice versa. It's really just focused upon the individuals involved, and it's so interesting because it just takes an individual perspective. It's like, what are these people? What are these two children who are trying to survive in this scenario? What do they feel? What do they see? What are their motivations? Or in The Wind Rises, what is the aircraft designer's motivation personally, on a personal level? Not what is the Japanese imperial government's motivations? What is his motivations? What does he care about, on a daily basis? When he gets up in the morning, when he goes to work, when he gets home and sees his family, what is he doing as an individual? And I love these movies, and a lot of Miyazaki's movies have these sort of similar themes. But I just love the way they cause you to focus on these people as individuals and not to think of them as just atoms in this monolithic group that is the Japanese Empire, but as individual people. And that's something it's just so easy to lose. Because, like we talked about earlier, tribalism it's a neat shortcut. If you really need to get your bearings really fast and figure out, what you should be doing when you come into a situation, being able to identify your tribe is kind of useful. But when you see a guy's license plate and say, oh, that guy's from North Carolina, so he's against me, or if you see a guy's skin and think, oh, his skin is the wrong color, so he's against me, at that point, you've let this shortcut become a hindrance rather than a help. So yeah, I love these movies. I agree with The Fireflies and The Wind Rises. They're just good because they teach you to look past that tribal identification, look past the color, look past the flag, and see that there are actual, unique human beings composing all of these groups, and we need to see past the tribe and respect that.
Yeah, and I haven't seen that movie, but I am a giant World War II buff, and there are so many individual stories in there that are just mind blowing. Where you get a look at people. One of my favorites is the story of a Luftwaffe pilot who escorted basically a bombing raid where we were flying over for occupied Europe and bombing. A bomber got crippled and was flying back to Britain, and a Luftwaffe pilot approached them. They thought that he was coming to clean up and shoot them down, and he actually ended up escorting them all the way back to England, or a safe distance from England, to make sure that they made it home. And the pilots later, I think they both immigrated to the United States and connected later in life. But that's just one of many, many individual stories of exactly what you're talking about. He was part of a machine. He was part of one of the most vicious machines in all of history, and yet he had that moment of nobility that he'll be forever known for, that Luftwaffe pilot. And so I think that the challenge for us in this is, we like to draw things together at Constructive Interference, and I think the challenge for us is, how do we make that individual statement? Yes, we're going to respond to poll questions on phone calls, and we're going to look like another statistic, and we're going to go vote, and we're going to do things that put us into, especially in our data-centric society, we're going to be lumped in all the time. But what do we do as individuals to avoid that tribal, those tribal elements, and return to a place where we can approach people as an individual and say, look, I know what my tribe says. I am not my tribe. I am an individual. I have places of agreement. I have places of disagreement, but honor me and respect me enough to take time to find out what's what. I think that's a worthwhile goal that we can all work toward. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We appreciate you spending time with us, and we look forward to talking with you next week. We're going to have a ton of great stuff to cover there too. Have a great week.